Good evening, everyone. My name is Connor Moran. I'm the director of the Wisconsin Book Festival. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for Katie Hill's She Will Rise. Katie, thank you so much for being here. I know that you're away from home and making this happen, so we really appreciate your time. And we're also joined by Laurel White from Wisconsin Public Radio. Laurel, thank you so much for moderating tonight's conversation. Before we get started, I just want to welcome everybody. On behalf of Madison Public Library and the Madison Public Library Foundation, I also want to thank those organizations for their incredible, steadfast support of free cultural events in our community. For the last 7.5 years, we've been putting them on at Madison Central Library, but since the pandemic, we've been doing them this way and seeing many, many of you, and we're really just delighted by their support and also by yours for showing up on a Thursday night when you could be doing something else. I also just want to take one moment to say 2 weeks from tonight, we do begin our fall celebration. So we do have 16 events over 3 days, starting on Thursday the 15th and running through Saturday the 17th. There are many great events in there, including other political books like Jennifer Palmieri's She Proclaims, Layla Lalami's Conditional Citizens, Paula Ramos's Finding Latinx. So we do hope you visit wisconsinbookfestival.org and find out a little bit more about that. So with that said, I'd like to welcome Katie Hill, author of She Will Rise, and Laurel White from Wisconsin Public Radio, and I will let them take it from here. Thank you so much to both of you, and I'll see you later. Bye.
Thank you, Connor. Hello, everyone.
Thanks, Connor, and hello, everyone out there. These virtual events are so surreal, but I know that Katie and I are looking forward to having this conversation, and folks can submit questions throughout. So we'll be keeping an eye out for those as well as things kind of evolve throughout the evening. So the first thing that I wanted to ask you, Katie, about the book was, when did you realize that you wanted to write the book, and kind of who did you have in mind for the audience? Who did you want to reach?
Yeah. Well, when I made the incredibly difficult decision to resign, I knew that I couldn't let it defeat me. I couldn't let it be, the moment that ended my career and that made me go away into silence. So figuring out what it was, as I talked about in my resignation speech, I may not be staying, in the chambers of the House of Representatives, but I'm going to stay in the fight one way or another. And so I felt like I was entering a journey to figure out what that looked like. And having been an English major, having been somebody who processes a lot of what I, think and I don't know, strategize around by writing it out. I started to kind of do that. I started to write about my experiences and just kind of following my train of thought. And then I ended up, because I sort of wrote about my close experience with suicidal ideation in an op-ed for the New York Times. And then it was kind of from there that I was like, I think there's, I should just keep going with this. And somebody had approached me earlier about possibly writing a book, and I thought it was way too soon. But I finally was like, well, this is probably the best time to do it as well. It's fresh. And while I'm, as I'm kind of working through it in my own head, I can do it on the page. And we did it. It happened so fast, but I'm really glad I did it immediately.
Yeah, I can't remember if I read this somewhere or heard it somewhere, but I consumed somewhere that you wrote the book in 3 weeks.
Yeah,
is that right?
Yeah. So I had started it a little bit before, but as I mentioned to you earlier, so I resigned at the end of October, and 2 months passed. It's the holidays. It's like trying to even kind of figure out how to get up out of bed. My mom had brain surgery. And then 2 days later, my brother passed away. My 20-year-old brother passed away. And I was the one who found him. And it was, a total tragedy that just turned everything upside down. Meanwhile, my book was supposed to be due in February. So I'd done a little bit of work before the holidays, but I had to get deadlines extended and everything. And because a big part of it was that I wanted to have it published before or at the anniversary, the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. So I decided that it was important for me to stick with that. They could have changed the publication date, and we could have continued it, but I wanted it to be before the election. I wanted it to be around this kind of momentous, anniversary, and so they were able to extend it as far as they could, which was to April 6th, which means that basically it was from the time quarantine started until April 6th that I was just writing nonstop.
It's a good thing to do during COVID quarantine.
Oh yeah, yeah. It would have been a lot harder if I had actual like invitations to go places that I had to turn down.
So what was I mean, you talked a little bit about kind of the emotional value of working through these things and writing through these things. You had to kind of process this and pull it together fast because of that deadline. Did you find that to be really difficult or valuable? Were you sometimes surprised at the things that were coming out on the page? I mean,
Yeah.
we can talk a little bit more about this later too, but there are so many elements to this book. I'm
Yeah.
so surprised that you were able to pull it together kind of in that time frame.
Yeah. Yeah, I was surprised by some of the things that came out, and the way that the story shaped, especially kind of integrating my grandmother's story into it. That was not expected. That wasn't planned in my book proposal or anything like that. That kind of happened that way. And so there was a lot of kind of reconciling my family history and the people that I've loved and looked up to with my own experiences, and with the abuse that I've been through and getting out of the relationship. And then I think above all else, where we need to go for women in general. And so there were days where I was just completely exhausted after writing, and I like sometimes I could work, write thousands of words and feel fine. There were other times when it would just be like this tiny little bit that I'd be working on, and I would just feel completely exhausted. Or especially when I was getting into the revision process, so I'd written out the initial stuff, but then trying to get the chapters into the order that made the most sense, and to make sure that everything flowed as well as possible, and adding in the stuff that gave it color. All of that, like if I knew I had to work on certain chapters, like especially the ones about sexual assault or about domestic violence, like those I knew were just going to be so triggering, right? And so being kind of in that, like you sort of have to force yourself to go into that headspace to be able to write about it well. And that takes a huge toll. So by the end of the day, you need to find every way that you can to cope with that. And then the next day, like hopefully you're done with it, or you can step away from that chapter for a bit. And it's not like any of the chapters are light, but like
Right.
at least some of them it felt lighter talking about abortion than it felt talking about other subjects. I mean, as messed up as that is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and for a while too, like I put down the book, and I once I turned it in before copy edits, and I didn't want to touch it again. So once copy edits came back, I had enough time, I think, but I went straight to the places where they said that things needed to be changed. And then it took me another few weeks before I was able and willing to do my own run through without like my own final run through of, if you want anything changed at all, like this is the one. So yeah, you get kind of sick of your own of your own writing.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who've worked on long projects like that, they know that by the time you're done with it, you're really done with it.
Totally.
So, I thought it was really interesting. You talked about how you wove in the story with your grandmother. You talk about historical figures, Susan B. Anthony. You pepper in, policy discussions with your own personal stories. There are so many elements to this book. Did you know from the very beginning that you didn't want to write just a straight memoir about your experience? Because you do have your story is pretty incredible. You could have just written, this is when I decided to run for office and this is what it was like.
Yeah, I think I did know that from the beginning. I knew that I didn't want to just write a memoir, because I think part of where I was at with it was that I didn't know the next stage of my story, right? And I felt like to write a memoir would have been, it just didn't feel like the right ending point, right? Or it didn't feel like I can say like these are the things that have happened so far, but I wanted to have a better sense of what's happening next, before I kind of tried to do it that way. And even now it feels like I have more living to do before I write a memoir, if that makes sense. A straight memoir. I can talk about my experiences, I can write about certain parts of it, but I don't want this. A memoir to me feels like this is the story of my life as a whole. And I guess at 33, I'm not willing to say that that's done.
Sure. Well, I mean, you do talk about, obviously the book has a deep sense of purpose in it, and you talk about your pack at the
Yeah.
end. Um, can you talk a little bit more about that and sort of where you want that to go and kind of what you see the next chapter being for you?
Yeah. So with my reelection funds that I'd already raised during the time that I held office, I've raised over $1 million. And you basically have the choice when you resign or lose to either keep that money there in case you decide to run again, or to just kind of like spend a little bit of it here and there on other races that you care about, et cetera. Or you can do what I did, which is to fully convert it into a political action committee. And I felt like people who had donated to me, they didn't donate for me to sit on it in case I decided to run for office sometime later. So I decided to focus on what I thought was a significant gap in major funders, and that's young women in particular, and uh, basically longer shot candidates that don't necessarily have that initial you know connection to wealth or connection to political kind of validators, or to the ability to raise money, or to the existing political kind of infrastructure, that I wanted to be able to be one of those validators to help people get kind of off the ground. And it's something I learned from my own run, and I think that women in particular need that, and that we have a role to play there, and we've done that in some of these races that we've endorsed in this cycle, and in many of them have invested, and our endorsement and investment has led to some of the other bigger groups like Emily's List, and other PACs that have ultimately come on board because we've kind of been able to validate. Now that means also that some people sometimes lose in their primaries, but we're trying to say is an investment from her time. We're not just investing in you in this race. We're investing in you as a leader and as somebody that we think is going to be important in the political sphere, even if it's not by winning this particular race. But the purpose of the PAC is kind of threefold. One is to support women candidates and to try and change over the face of power. The second is to kind of really research and mobilize young women as a voting bloc, so that we're not just, we know that we vote overwhelmingly in one direction, and that our views just line up in one direction if you're talking about women under 40. But we're not as reliable as far as showing up goes, and as far as ensuring that we're showing up not just in presidential years, but in voting down ballot. And we want to try and do the research to figure out what is it going to take to mobilize young women consistently, and also to specifically mobilize young women to vote for women. So that's a piece of the research that we're doing. And then the third piece that we're doing is advocacy. And so it's once we have all of these, once the election season's over, then we have to go and we need to actually advocate on behalf of the policies that have been outlined, right? The ones that we know will level the playing field and will bring us closer to equality. But it's kind of a feminist agenda that needs to constantly be pushed. And that's kind of what I see as our role moving forward. So I'm excited to do that. And, this basically we get through November, see kind of where we land, and then go from there in terms of how much scope we can take on, and how much we can expand in the next cycle.
Mhm. So, a lot of your book obviously is talking about female candidates and elected officials and kind of what they go through. What are your conversations with women who are thinking about running for office like these days? And what kind of advice do you give them about, there are so many things, but I think the two things off the top of my head are how to kind of grapple with this double standard that you talk about, but also, and this was partially a question that we got from someone that's watching, how do you run for office with the personal knowledge that you're not perfect?
Yeah.
And the worries about that?
Yeah. Well, two things. One is I don't necessarily give very rosy advice, because I think that would be disingenuous. But what I say is that there's a good chance you're going to get hurt. People are going to say nasty things. Politics can get really dirty. stuff that you thought was private because you trusted someone doesn't mean it is. And we can hope it is, but we don't know for a fact it is. But what we need, but what we don't do know is that we need you. Like this isn't a chance. This isn't a moment where we can say, I'm scared that this could happen. This is the moment where we have to strap on our armor, whatever that looks like. And we need to dive in, and we need to say that I'm willing to accept these risks because I know how much my voice and my voice on behalf of women, young people, LGBT people, other marginalized communities, how much that matters. And I'm stepping up because I am strong enough to take it and to try and make it easier for the next people who do. So, that's one of the big reasons that I decided not to go away entirely, is to say that you can't, I may have stepped down because I felt like that was the right thing to do at the time, in terms of not wanting to be a distraction for, or a liability to my, to my colleagues, or not to want to put my staff through it on an ongoing basis, and dealing with just kind of like the personal struggle that came from being in this abusive relationship. But that we can't accept that, if you've made a mistake, if you have lived a life of a normal human being, that means, especially for women, that you're not fit to serve, because it's the exact opposite. We want people with real world experiences, with lived struggle, with lived, who have made mistakes, own up to them, and then do something about them. And so I think that's kind of, I guess that's the way that I'm encouraging people now. And I wish that I'd even had a better kind of grasp on this before. And maybe if I had been a longer term politician, or if I'd, as it was, it still hasn't even been 4 years since I ever considered running for office in the first place. So I think it's just kind of like, get ready for it, know that it could happen, know what you're going to say, know that it's not your fault if that does happen, and how you're going to steel yourself, and how you're going to handle it. Because I think that because of the experience that I went through, it has actually made it more possible for people to say, I'm not resigning because of this. I'm standing up, and I'm owning it, and I'm going to keep fighting, and I'll let the voters decide. And I certainly sometimes wish that I'd done that.
Yeah. So if a young woman was elected to office and had an experience similar to yours, where, she was in a position where she'd made a decision that she wasn't proud of, it had come out, and would you give her the advice to stay, you think?
I would give her the advice that I needed at that point, which is that the decision is yours, and you have to decide based not on what you think needs to happen, or how you think you need to be held responsible. But you need to decide based on what you feel like is the best thing. Can you, in good conscience, continue to do your best job, or do you feel like this is going to be something that is too difficult in the position that you're in now? No one can say what the right or wrong answer is, but I think what I would want to say to people, and what I would have wanted to hear more of, is that this will blow over, and people will have your back. And I think that and maybe even more guidance on, like, how do you own something, apologize for it, and ride it through. And I don't, I think because we're in the beginning of a new era in terms of Me Too, and the responsibility that employers have, and everything like that, I think that it looks different, and people were in many cases just not quite sure how to react. It's a modern problem. Mine was a case that was related to biphobia and to I guess non-heteronormative relationships, and I think that those are all factors that kind of played into it. But regardless of the scandal, I think that I would say to somebody that, like, this is your choice, and you need to feel empowered to make that decision based on what you think is right, and not feel pressured to do something, based on what you think others think is right. If that makes sense.
Do you feel like the country, because of the experiences that we've been having over the past several years with Me Too, and just things coming out about different public figures and how the public responds to that. Do you think we're evolving, in our opinion, in a good way, of the ability of someone to be redeemed, or the acceptance of someone making mistakes and still being a quote unquote, valuable
Yeah,
person
yeah.
in leadership?
I think we truly haven't figured it out. And I think we're going to have to. And, part of it is, and I talk about this in the book, it's just like, what do we want from people? Ultimately, if we're saying we're holding people accountable now, what does that look like? Things are changing, and they're changing in a much needed, and fairly dramatic way. And it has to happen. It absolutely has to happen. But what is the right answer for when people did things either that they should have straight up known better, and that is criminal or was just wrong from the very beginning, or all the way into the gray area lines, or the spaces where it was a poor judgment, or a joke that went awry, or you know what I mean? Like, I think many of us experience this in our day-to-day lives, right? We have had the person who's hit on us and it's been gross, but we also are like, I'm not going to try and ruin this guy's life because of it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But what do we want in those cases? How do we want people to be able to learn from it, and still be able to be valuable members of society? Because if it's anything like our other liberal kind of value systems, then we do believe in rehabilitation, we believe in recovery, and we believe in people being able to integrate back no matter what kind of mistakes they've made. And I just don't think that we've truly figured out what that looks like. Partly also because people who are I don't know, perpetrators, or who have been kind of called out by the Me Too movement, have a really hard time apologizing and owning up to it. And I think that that's the first step.
Sure. So, for young women that are weighing that decision about, going in run for public office, um, what sort of, I guess what I'm trying to get at here is the balance between what you called putting on your armor and being prepared and going, being a warrior and going into battle and
Yeah.
making this decision,
Yeah.
and preserving yourself as a person, right?
Yeah.
As having this sort of like hanging on to your individual identity and kind of your self-care and taking care of yourself, and not
Yeah.
compromising that. How do you figure that out? Because I feel like some people might be like, I really want to take that step. I feel like I could contribute, but I'm not quite ready to be maybe a warrior to the extent that I need to be.
Well, I think it looks different for everybody, right? So if you feel like you're not ready to have your entire life ripped open, then okay, probably don't run for the highest profile congressional race. Right? But if you feel like you're ready to contribute in a pretty in a significant way, like, that stuff is far less likely to come out if you're running for, the water district, or if you're running for town council, or if you're, you know what I mean? Like, and even if it does, I mean, obviously everyone's experience is kind of, I have no idea what it is, that what things people don't want to have known, because it could be things that they're completely faultless in. It's just that it's private stuff that you don't want the whole world to have known about you. And I mean, God knows I understand that. But I think I think that there's a level of preparation that can help with that, of knowing what your vulnerabilities are, knowing what who you can trust and who you can't, and also like where and why those kind of threats might manifest. But also, you know I think there's a part of it that's like, if any of these things do happen, then what's my response going to be? And if you're steeled in that, if you know that you're hoping for the best, you're hoping that it never does come to that. But if it does, what you're planning, what your response is going to be, then you feel a lot more secure in it. And I think that, uh, but that doesn't mean that you have to go straight into the most nasty political race that is around your area. There are other ways of easing into it, and still claiming your power, and still being a warrior.
Sure. You don't have to jump in the deep end necessarily.
Yeah, you can you
Right.
can you can walk in at your pace.
So you talked about some of the research that your PAC is doing as well about engaging young women to vote more. Obviously, that's something that a lot of Democrats are focusing on leading up to November, mobilizing the young vote. What are you seeing there? Are you optimistic that more young women are going to come out to vote this year than we saw in, 2016, for example?
Yeah, I'm very optimistic. I'm really optimistic about the generation. I guess we'll call it generation, but Gen Z, which has aged from, these are people who were in high school when Trump was getting elected, that have seen the devastating effects of climate change, have seen the devastating effects of gun violence, and have really bore witness in their most kind of uh, um, the time when they're shaped the most. And I think that they're the ones that are going to be showing up in a way that we've never seen youth turn out before. I truly believe this in my soul, and I don't. Maybe I'm wrong, but I really fundamentally believe that this is true, and I think we're going to see that across the country. Um, our polling is not. It's still in the field, so I haven't gotten the results yet back. But as soon as we do, I'm looking forward to kind of diving into those and seeing if we can analyze it to get better information about what it takes to get women who young women to not just vote at the top line, but also to ensure that they're voting down ballot this election and then in future elections as well.
So we have another question from someone that's watching, and they ask, what about our current governance, laws, culture, would you say illustrates a glaring example of where we need more women actively engaged in politics?
Yeah, well, a perfect example is let's just go with cyber exploitation, right? 90% of people who are victims of cyber exploitation are women.
Mhm.
Overwhelmingly, they're under 40, and in almost all cases, the perpetrator or the victimizer goes completely free. It's not even a felony in many states. It's not a federal crime at all. And the reality is that if someone hasn't experienced this personally, then they just simply don't prioritize it. So the people who are leading the efforts on these laws are women, like people who are leading the efforts on equal pay, on domestic violence, on any of the issues that we kind of talk about as being so fundamental to achieving equality. They just don't get the attention if you don't have someone who has experienced or knows people who have experienced the detriments of poor policy. And so I think that that's why the bottom line of the book is that we have all of these policies that we know can work, but the only way that we're going to get them passed and prioritized as needed is if we have representation that reflects who we are. And that means getting to, instead of 25% of Congress, which is what we make up now, we need to get to half. And we have to be pretty aggressive to be able to actually hit that marker.
Mhm. And you talk about getting to half, and this is something that you talk about in the book, but sort of giving ourselves permission, a person giving themselves permission to vote for a woman just because she's a woman.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you talk more about that and kind of the block that you feel like some people have about, saying that just because she's a woman, she's going to do a good job?
Yeah, well, so I think that when people say, I want to vote for a woman, but I don't, not just because she's a woman, like she has to be, better than the guy or whatever. The fact is, we've been voting for men because they're men forever. Like that is the reason that they have been able to run for office and have been elected to office. So, it's time to flip the table. And my point is that we're not going to get there if we aren't aggressive about it. I think that that is a recognition by saying I want to vote for a woman because she's a woman, is a recognition that her experiences, her understanding of the world by being a woman and having gone through what she has, adds value to our representative democracy. And I think that it just is. It's for example, we have not had young moms pretty much ever in Congress. This is the first time that we've got a single mom in. Katie Porter was the first single mom of young parents in Congress at all. And it's like, how are those issues going to be elevated when the people who represent us aren't aware of them and just simply don't understand how important it is to prioritize them? So yeah, I think that that's really where I'm coming from, and that I think people hold women to an even higher standard by saying, "Oh, well, I want to vote for a woman, just not that woman." And well, is she as good enough as the guy, or am I favoring her because she's a woman? So it's kind of like this overcompensation because women are, or women candidates are women, that we're up against as well.
I love this question that we got from someone in the audience, and they ask, what have you found are the reasons that younger women don't vote?
Yep. Okay, so this is a really important one, and this is one for anyone who has friends or family that they can talk to. One of the biggest reasons why young women don't vote is because they feel like they don't know enough about
Hmm.
the elections. They feel they don't know enough about the people that they're voting for. And what's interesting is that when you compare it to men of their age who say that they're totally likely to vote, it's not like they're consuming any less information. They get just as much news as, if not more. They actually know more than men do. But that's not a barrier for the men. The men don't think twice about whether they know enough, and women do. So, I think part of what we need to do is make sure that that women feel empowered and feel like their knowledge is, even the fact that they're having that question of "Do I know enough?" means that they're insightful and actually have perspectives that need to be shared through voting, and that it doesn't have to be, like, just like we were talking about, you don't have to jump in fully. Like, there are ways to, you don't have to, by voting, you don't have to become like this crazy political expert, right? Like, there are ways that you can walk through it. Even though I'm saying everyone should vote in every race, like, you don't have to vote in every race if you don't feel, I guess, ready for that. But young women in particular, this is a real vulnerability, and it's one that it illustrates how we just have this different perspective than men do often, and hopefully we can change that.
That's so interesting that you bring that up, because I think one of the things at play when people are voting by mail more this year is that you get your ballot and you've got some time with it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So if
Yep.
you feel like you want to take some time and look into some
Study
things.
things or whatever. Yeah, I mean, like, research. I always had the editorial page of a newspaper that I trusted, that I was like, and it didn't mean I voted with it. This is when I was younger, well before I was in politics, but it didn't mean I voted with it, but at least, like, it gave me the information and it showed me where people were standing. And one of the things I'm suggesting for people now is to do, like, Zoom ballot filling out parties,
Oh yeah.
like especially for, and a lot of us are getting together in different settings, whether it's outside or restaurants where we can. And I think that, like, if you know people who are maybe a little bit more hesitant about voting because they feel overwhelmed by information, this is a great chance to be like, "Hey, I got my ballot. Have you gotten your ballot? Like, you want to go through it together?" You know what I mean?
Mhm.
That's the kind of hand, or one-on-one uh, uh, engagement that needs to happen now.
Sure, we can add it to our list of socially distanced activities that we can do
Exactly.
safely, right?
Exactly.
Voting.
Totally.
So another kind of subset of the question I wanted to ask about why some people might not vote and why some women might not vote. I think that there are a certain um, number of women, a population of women that just feel so disenfranchised,
Mhm.
or are disheartened, disenchanted, so many dis words
Yeah.
for the system right now, and
Yeah.
they've kind of chosen not to engage with it
Mhm.
because of
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
How do you tackle that problem and try to get people to re-engage?
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to be disaffected right now. I mean, it's so easy. It's like, it's hard not to be, right? But what I say to people, and I hope this is the message in general, is that, like, our literal only hope to change anything is by voting. Like, that's it. There's not another option. There's no, you know, it's revolution or vote, and that's it. Like, there's, so, people, you can be disaffected, you can hate the two-party system, you can hate your options, but at the end of the day, one option is very much better than the other, and you know where your rights stand, and if we want to move things in the right direction, then we have to vote. We have to show up. We have to vote en masse. We have to, like, make sure that our the right that so many people fought so hard for is actually upheld and that we exercise it. And it's, I don't mean to get preachy about it, but like, you don't get a choice right now to opt out. You just, if you do, then you no longer get to complain about anything ever. So I'm sort of taking that approach right now.
Are you having that conversation with people now, or
I
are you
am.
having more of
Yeah, I'm thinking specifically about like my younger cousins, and
Mhm.
although I have to say, I'm not encountering it too much. I think there's a certain amount of like, well, I wish it would be better, but yeah, of course I'm going to vote against Trump, or you know what I mean.
Mhm.
And I've even noticed more people than I would have than I ever would have expected, who know who's running locally, and I'm like, that's a big improvement over just a few years ago. When I mean, the drop off from the presidential to the congressional campaigns or congressional races was just massive. I think we might see a better number this time where people are really paying attention to it. So I'm optimistic.
When you talk about people, engaging with the system, someone running for office, uh, there's obviously another option where you can just be an advocate, you can work on
Yeah,
issues, you can be
totally.
somebody behind the scenes. Somebody in the audience asked about, the League of Women Voters in
Yeah,
particular.
yeah.
What organizations have you engaged with? What would you recommend that people seek out if they want to kind of touch base with an organization in their community and have a positive impact?
Yeah, so League of Women Voters is a great example because they're nonpartisan. Their entire purpose is information sharing. They're intended to get information to people about how they can vote, their rights around it, what, for example, like what is your polling place, what are the issues that are on the ballot, and who are the candidates that are on the ballot. And I think that that's that's so important when we're talking about people who are literally inhibited from voting because they feel like they don't know enough information. This is a way to get information to people. Others, there are specific organizations that are around particular issues. For example, if you're concerned about voting rights, or if you're concerned about voting intimidation, like there are different organizations in your community that you can look into. But I think that another thing that people, if it's not too late in some places, we desperately need poll workers this time. We need people to yeah. I mean, I'm very concerned about polling places across the country not being staffed enough. So that's a place where if people feel like they can be safe and do so, we need that. And I think that that's going to be an even bigger issue than might be expected, because I think because of the rhetoric and everything like that, we just may see problems with enough people voting by mail, which means people are going to show up, but that the polling places have already been reduced, and there are going to be lines just like crazy. So yeah, the organizations vary by state, but if you look up voter protection, or different organizations that are focused on like flipping certain districts. Those are like I'm involved with Demcast, which has Flip the 14. It's an initiative that has the 14 swing states that we have to really be focusing on, and how you can get involved in each of those. So there are lots of things out there, but I keep reiterating, the most important thing that you can do is literally with every single person, every person that you're friends with, whether they were, you were in high school cheer with them, or you were, they were your neighbor when you were in kindergarten. Like, this is the time to reconnect with people and to say, hey, I'm really passionate about the election this time. Like, have you thought about voting? Do you know where you're going to vote? Things are changing this time. Is there anything I can help you with? You can choose to who you want to focus on helping, but for the most part, women, and especially young women, are going to vote in one particular direction if they vote. So
I think we get to nerd out about polling now.
great, love it.
So that's fun. We got a question about, and you mentioned that your organization is polling right now, right?
Yeah.
So maybe that's where this question came from. Someone asked, how do we get semi-accurate polling in the age of social media rather than phone calls or paper questionnaires? So how are you going about your polling?
Yeah, we're doing a hybrid, so a hybrid of phone and online polling. It's part of what we do is we want to match up the people that we call with like voter registration information, and make sure that it's targeted to certain zip codes and to demographic information and everything like that. So, it's not something that we just put out and look for responses to come back from. Like we put it out to targeted demographics and to targeted hopeful respondents. And so, I'm not a personally a pollster. I hire one who is great at this and knows the methodology in and out. But I know that, for example, with young women, when we're looking for women under 40, we had to extend the timeline of our poll of how long it was out in the field, because we don't answer phones as often. Like if you're looking to talk to people over 40, then you're going to, a lot more of them answer their phones. We simply don't. We just see a number we don't know and we hit decline. And so trying to get women to answer the phones to even hit the ratio of, or even hit the ratio that we wanted to get of phones versus online was harder for us. So it just takes a much bigger, it takes a lot more calls to get to a small sample size, or a relatively small sample size that is big enough to be scientifically accurate, statistically accurate.
How are you feeling about polling in general this year? I think a lot of people, a lot of Democrats in particular, kind of felt burned by polling in 2016. And so I think there's some attention on that. What's your sort of personal philosophy about polling and how people should feel about it?
Well, I think that the skepticism it's both, it should be, but it's also probably gone a bit too far. If we were looking, I think some of the biggest mistakes in last cycle was that there was so much focus on the national polls, when in reality, national polls didn't matter. It came down to the Electoral College. And this is what the Trump campaign was effective in, was targeting these narrow wins in states like Wisconsin, where it would tip them over the top on in the Electoral College. And Hillary did win. She did win the national popular vote, but she didn't win the Electoral College. And now I think there's so much more of a focus on these key states, what the polling looks like. And also, just because you see somebody who is up, like we have to know that everything is a plus or minus 5 margin of error. So even if you hear that Biden's up 5, that might sound like a lot, but that's the same as them being that could be the same as them being tied based on the poll. We just don't know. So you need to look at like an average of polls over a long, as much time as possible, over as many data points as possible, for it to be realistic. And I think pollsters were just too, and more probably importantly, pundits were too quick to say, oh, well, look at this, and not go any deeper, because they thought Donald Trump was somebody to be written off, when clearly that was a huge mistake. But if you know statistics and if you know how polling works, then, you take them with a grain of salt. You know that they aren't perfect, but they can point you in trends and they can give you helpful information, but they're not they're not what are those things called? Fortune. What
Right.
What are those?
Magic 8 ball?
Yeah.
I was holding
that's what I was looking for. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of social media, and this is kind of going back to being an elected official or being a candidate, but I feel like as we're going to enter this era where more millennials are elected officials, and younger than millennials, we're going to see social media histories or just social media conversations about them become more prominent. What are your thoughts about just kind of the role of social media in politics now and in the future?
Oh, it's shifting just massively, even as we speak. I mean, we've seen it to a certain extent already with how QAnon has had this rise. I still know a lot of people who have never heard of QAnon, but it's like this crazy extremist conspiracy. You can't even call it a theory. It's a whole bunch of different theories. But that actual people who are going to become members of Congress subscribe to now, and that has made its way through social media and through other avenues on the internet, it's having a massive impact on people. Same thing with YouTube. It's like taking people down really deep rabbit holes of extremism. And just your history is one thing, but how we're monitoring these companies and how we're ensuring that the companies themselves are held to some kind of account for the content that is created and the way that it is used. It's, it is, we need to have the conversations around free speech, the intersection of free speech and safety of community and the well-being of community. And so, and right to privacy. So I think that there's a whole lot that, frankly, even if you look at the hearings around Facebook or Twitter that we've had in Congress or in the House or in the Senate, it's just been like, how do you even have? They don't even have the slightest clue what is going on because they're so old and have never used this. So to even try to, like, it's going to be on us to, and on the next generation of leaders to have these nuanced discussions and to say the power that is held by these internet companies. And the influence that it's having over our civilization, and it both in our individual lives, but also on a much bigger scale, needs to be regulated. And you need to have people who grew up in that world and who understand it to be able to do so effectively without, infringing on free speech.
Right. It sort of plays into what you were saying before about women bringing issues that are important to women and things that they've experienced to the table as lawmakers. It's younger people who have a different kind of understanding of the nuances of social media, bringing that to the places that regulate social media.
Yeah, totally.
So we've got another really interesting question about campaigning during the time of COVID. I know this is something that Democrats in Wisconsin have been talking about a lot. There haven't been the rallies that a lot of folks were expecting this fall. I'm thinking about, in 2008, I think Madison had a Bruce Springsteen concert with Barack Obama. I mean, big things that are just not going to happen because of where we are right now. How do parties go about energizing voters when they can't have that sort of event that they're so used to?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question, and everyone's trying to figure it out as we go right now. I've spoken to a lot of my former colleagues that are campaigning now, and as well as the candidates that we're supporting, and it's truthfully like there's just no one's come up with a good answer yet. They're drive-through events, and especially as Democrats, where we are putting safety as a priority. You heard on the debate stage that Trump was trying to say that Biden's not having these rallies because he can't get people to show up, and it's like, no, dude. It's because we actually are not wanting to have people have outbreaks, or not wanting to have outbreaks in communities where these kinds of gatherings have happened. And so I think that it's requiring a lot of contact through digital and through texting and through phone calls that we, frankly, that are tough to measure the outcomes of. And that's why I really am just encouraging people so much to go back to, like, creating your own list. This is something that they have us do as candidates. It's basically, as you start to campaign, you make your list of literally everyone you've ever known and how much money you're going to ask them for. And if you're not going to ask them for money, what you're going to ask them for instead. This is just like basic running for office. And I think that that's the kind of thing that we need everybody to be doing, especially in swing states, to write down everyone who's into your contact list. And, if you're like, nope, Trumper, fine, leave them alone. But for everyone else, if you're like, oh, I haven't seen them post anything political, like, call them and say, hey, I don't know what your politics are, but like, I'm really worried about this election. And, entering into that conversation and just doing this, like, it can be pretty time intensive, but it's also so rewarding when you talk to somebody and they're like, yeah, I've been thinking about voting, but it's just like so much going on that I didn't really know. And you can say, yeah, here, let me show you. Go to vote.wisconsin.gov or whatever correct me. I hope somebody corrects me on that because I don't know.
I vote.wi.gov.
Okay, there you go. So that's you can actually help them do it and help them create a plan. And studies show that when someone has a personal level of accountability to even to a stranger, if they're like, I've promised someone that I'm going to vote, then that makes them 6 times more likely to do it. So if you're able to get that promise to you as a connected individual, as someone that people actually know, not just a volunteer on the phone, then it's that much more likely to have an impact. So, you're right. The candidates they're just not going to be able to energize people through crowds. Everyone's trying to adapt with these Zoom things and with, concerts through Zoom and through social media, but it's tough. And so I think that's why it's got to be on the grassroots right now.
So what's your plan for Election Day?
Yeah. Well, in terms of how I'm going to vote, or like,
Well, I think that part's probably obvious, but
no. I just mean like, I like my voting plan is I'm voting by mail, and I'm turning it in as soon as I can. But my on election day itself, I plan to be back in Washington D.C.
Mhm.
Um, Still figuring out what the landscape looks like in terms of who I might hang out with, but I'm going to be doing some coverage of election night on Vice News tonight. So I'll
Oh,
be, yeah,
fun.
I'll be commenting. But
That's great. Well, you'll
I
probably
decided I
be
wanted
keeping
to
an
be in
eye
DC because regardless of the outcome, it's going to be, I have a feeling it's going to be colorful.
on. Yeah, I'm sure that you'll have an eye on us here in Wisconsin as you're kind of watching returns
Oh my
come in.
gosh. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, hopefully everybody knows just how important their vote is this time. And
Mhm.
especially, with you guys and with, the other states that, like, as Californians, as East Coasters, like, it's most we can do in many cases. Like, we're going to vote how we're going to vote, but our electoral vote it's already baked in, right? We need to, um, the most we can do is volunteer and give money in these other places where it's going to come down to a much smaller number of people.
Mhm. As folks kind of have obviously the election top of mind, and is there just anything else that you want people to, other than making a plan for how they're going to vote and reaching out to friends and family, is there anything else that really want people to know at this time when we're 30 days, I think, maybe away?
Yeah, it's right about there. I think people should have hope. I really do. I think that it can be very easy to fall into this. Every day is horrible, and that it can look so bleak. Like, how are we ever going to get our way out of this? What happens if the election's close? And but what I'll say is that this is a matter of and why we should feel such conviction and hope around our votes is that it's a matter of scale. And if we win in a landslide, then all the threats around voter suppression, all the threats around him questioning the authenticity of ballots, everything like that, it doesn't. Oh, and frankly, corrupt state legislatures, or people who might be casting the electoral votes, like, or the Supreme Court, like, all of that stuff becomes so much more impossible the bigger our victory. So the more people vote in every single state, even in the ones, if you think it's always been red, it's always going to be red, you got to vote there too, because the margins matter so much this time. And I think that we're going to see that we're going to see that manifest. And once we do, the fight's nowhere near done, and we've got a lot of a mess to dig ourselves out from under. But we should be optimistic about the future. And I think that if anything else, people have learned that we can't be complacent, because we're this close to a disaster at any given point. So don't give up hope.
I know we need to let you go soon. But I asked you about your takeaways during this time and for the election. For people that haven't read your book yet, haven't gotten it, what would you say to them just about what you're hoping to do with it, why you would motivate them to go out and seek out the book?
Yeah. So the book's intention is to use my story, but as an example of the battles and the struggles that women face every single day. So it happened to me on a high profile scale, but it happens to women every single day in every single aspect of life. And it's multi-generational, and it happens everywhere. So but what I try to do is, I point all this out. I point out the statistics and the numbers and the real world examples of how all of this stuff manifests. But I also try to focus on solutions and on real ways that we could impact change, and that we could expect things to level out, and to create true equality. So there's an action plan, and that entire action plan starts with electing women. So if you have felt hopeless, if you felt like, how can we keep struggling and getting up, or when the risks are so high, why would it be worth it to step into the fight? Then that's why I would say you should read it, because it gives you that piece, but it also gives you the plan. And basically, we're trying to recruit people to be part of this. So, yes, please pick it up.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed chatting with you, and
Likewise.
I know that everybody got their questions answered, so
Great.
I'm sure that they appreciated that too. So
absolutely. Well, thank you, and hopefully you all get out and vote. We're counting on you.
Absolutely.
Katie, thank you so much for being here. It was delightful to have you. I feel like there was a lot of hope, even though you told us that every chapter is a little bit, not easy, but it was such a great discussion tonight. And Laurel, I think we have an exciting 30-ish days here, and a lot of us here in Wisconsin will hear from you many, many more times between now and the end of the year. Well, thank you so much for being here, Katie, and thank you for this book. I think it's really it's important now, and it'll be important for a really long time for a lot of people. So we really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us tonight. We wish you the best with the rest of your tour. Thank you to everyone watching at home. I hope to see you again. We have events tomorrow, Monday, and Tuesday. Tomorrow's Pulitzer Prize winner Marilyn Robinson. So we hope to see a lot of you come back. We'll see you soon. Have a great night.
Have a good night. Bye.